I'd like to, yeah, just center myself for a minute because
Mm-hmm.
with everything that's going on, like we talked about before, those energies are wrought with uh, just conflict,
Mm-hmm.
most definitely.
Yes. And from what I understand, this is the first of three. So we're going to have three, like now, one in October, one in December. And so these are these sort of bring it to the surface so that you can sort of skim off the top or find out what's going on. And so this is kind of one of those times, especially in family systems, especially in relationship dynamics, where some of the uglies are going to start coming up, or some of the challenges, or some of the things that we really didn't want to look at.
Wow.
And so this is where we want to be very compassionate about, oh, well, of course this is going to rear its head now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
To understand
Mm-hmm.
where it's coming from.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. I'm finding, just as I kind of am out looking online and seeing what's going on, it's just the disparities between the two ways of viewing the world and how that separation that you and I have discussed about in the past is becoming even more apparent. And I've seen it going back from more of a parental perspective. I've seen it within two separate groups that I'm involved with online. I like to get the feedback from both. And one is a group of parents here in Texas who are pro taking their children back to school, and that's
Mm-hmm.
something that they're fighting
Mm-hmm.
for. And then we have
Mm-hmm.
a whole nother group that are deciding to do the online portion of it. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
the last month and a half, there's been a huge political and emotional back pushback from
Mm-hmm.
everybody on what's going to be the best for them and their family. A lot of attacking going on as to what choices people are making and not making for their families, and just to watch the disparity between those groups kind of unfold, being that fly on the wall, has really brought up a lot for me. And
Okay.
yeah.
Before we delve into what it's bringing up, there's a third group.
Hmm.
So there's those that want to put their child into back into school. There's those that are going to choose to homeschool and or to do online. And then the third is those who want to homeschool, who are stepping completely away from the required curriculum,
Correct.
because they don't want to do it through the school systems,
Hmm.
electronic or digital. And so that is even a more interesting, third one to throw in that mix, because we're seeing more families considering homeschooling than they've ever done before.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've always had a huge cohort here that I was, some of our kids that had processing delays,
Mm-hmm.
diagnoses of ADHD, depression, anxiety, autism spectrum disorders, who had already made that decision to go out into the homeschool field.
Mm-hmm.
And what's been really amazing that I've seen from that group is them stepping up and helping the parents that are
Mm-hmm.
in this place, even the ones that are doing the online. And so that's been really beautiful to see. And just
Yeah.
people who are just trying to figure it out. I know for one, and then I've also seen these popping up of different centers, because the school districts, especially with the larger schools, are not allowed to have the children on campus. But as a
Mm-hmm.
result, they're creating these community centers, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is a fabulous idea. So parents can actually bring their children. They're going to be providing some of the, what would I say, the care while they're there, and then them doing their online schoolwork.
Mm-hmm. Now, here in the state of Washington, they're exploring moving classrooms outside and doing year-round outdoor school. So they're
Wow.
switching into using the core curriculum and adapting it into science studies on earth, on living organisms, on rivers, on streams, on oceans. And so they're moving the curriculum outdoors, and the core requirement is waterproof equipment, and some places where, like some pavilions and some places where they can gather, separated out, still in social distancing, but spread out. And I think that's the part that got me kind of excited. It was like, wow, if I could have gone to outdoor school year round, I'd have been a really good student.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
know. It would have been so much fun. Yeah, my one of my nephews did that down in Costa Rica, and that was just amazing. The more
Yes.
integrated into the environment, and just the experiential portion of the education. And yeah, I mean, if we could take that kind of bird's eye view of looking at this, where is our educational system going? And it's really a place that we can play as we get through the muck of the anxiety of the unknown. And one thing I am seeing, especially from as that separation between people is occurring right now in 2020, is the group that's really holding fast into things are going to go back to normal.
Right.
I do not change. This is too much change. And so those who are really hoping that it'll pass. They've created these deadlines. Well, once the election happens and my candidate wins, then things will change. Or after the new year, then things are going to change. And so there's a lot of expectations and decisions that are being made, and sort of what we're trying to figure out, just because that shaking of the system is it's just tremendous. It reminds me of the earthquake down in Costa Rica that they just went through. It's jolting to the system. And so we have a camp that's it is going to go back to normal. And then, and it changes. It's very difficult, very, very difficult.
Well, and I think that's the piece where I think what you and I have to offer right now is that if it doesn't settle down, and we have to be sort of on our toes, and we have to be flexible, and we have to adapt to what's coming our way, and we have to be creative and think, well, if not this, then what can I do? If not this, then what can I do? Because that's that adaptive thinking that's going to help all of us as we move forward, because we can't hold our breath and wait, because what's been sort of demonstrated to us so far is we thought we could hold our breath in March and wait till May, then maybe till June. Oh, I'm holding on till the end of July because school's going to start soon. And now it's almost like you're turning blue and you're still wanting to hold on to what that is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep going back to this concept that whether we believe in astrology or whether we don't, if we know that on January 12th, something significant happened, and the target of the switch the target of having this Saturn Pluto in Capricorn thing come down is that it really just looks at systems and institutions. And that's been the part where we've watched our medical institutions get up in arms. We've watched our political institutions go up in arms. We've watched our education system go up in arms. We've watched our employment system go up in arms. We've watched our postal system go up in arms. So without even really spending a lot of time, we've just identified 5 institutions that we counted on a daily basis that are up in a state of flux right now. So it would make sense that the family system at its core is going to follow this. Right?
Absolutely.
It's going to do this too. And whether we want it to or not, the family system is really leading, because if the family is intact and strong and healthy and adapting, then everything else will adapt around it. If the family system is rocking and we don't trust ourselves, or we don't trust our partner, or we don't trust our children, or we don't trust our grandparents and parents, how do we establish that those core relationships can be a support system?
Absolutely. And that's a good segue into how does one do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you know? I go back to, and it could be something that's a little bit of a hot button for people, but there's a very public family feud going on right now, related to Kellyanne Conway, her daughter, and then the father. And I know that, and George Conway, I know that them being in two different political camps, the media, the different camps of the political system have kind of been pitting the two of them against each other. Well, now this young lady has, unfortunately, you know, my heart really goes out to her, has had some revelations out in a very public way on
Right.
Twitter and Instagram and all of these places. And so, and it's gotten to the point that the family, which I respect immensely, has decided to step down from their respective positions and focus on the health of their children. And so, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this, and this might be something that's going on even within our own family systems and our own parenting, of understanding how it's going, especially those of us who may be parenting from a blended family standpoint, where one group would like their child to go back to school or engage in an old system and they're pretty solid in their belief system, and the other side is in a more, no, I'm going to take the, you know, the homeschool route, or no, I would prefer for my child to stay at home and in a bubble. And, you know, I think you're exactly right. It's bringing everything to the surface, but how do you know it's under the cover, so to speak, and bubbling and brewing like a volcano, so it doesn't get to the point where it's erupting in a very public forum.
And it doesn't get to the point where you have a 15-year-old who's asking for emancipation. Correct. Away from two parents that cannot keep their power struggles from influencing each other, themselves, and the family system, which is in essence what we have seen for the last 25 years, Erin, in the therapeutic industry, which is when we have a child who, by the time they're 12, 13, 15, 17, 18, 19, who makes a dramatic statement, yes, it's because there's been years of observation. This isn't a sudden decision, an erratic decision that a child makes, that they want to be emancipated, or that they've made an attempt on their life, or that they've literally been unable to get out of bed and refuse to go to school, or they are self-medicating with drugs and accelerating. These are, you know, this is where we as parents have to turn around and go, are we good with how we respect each other and how we dialogue with each other and how we problem solve together? Absolutely. Because if we're having a power struggle here, what's happening is we're putting additional pressure onto our children, and then we're, you know, pretending that they can't hear us. We think that they're watching the television. We think that they're in bed. We think that they don't hear us in the backseat of the car because their screens are on, when we're having this tension and these disagreements. So where I think we go first is, as parents, we have to lead with our energy systems. Absolutely. And lead with, am I calm? Am I open? Am I willing to have a dialogue about something outside of my comfort zone? Am I willing to compromise? And can we come up with solutions that's a win-win? Correct. Because as soon as we pull into our corner and go, I'm right and you're wrong, that's what we're seeing on the larger scale in our political system, in our local and regional government systems. What we're seeing is we're the good guys and you guys are the bad guys. And if we do that with our partner, with our co-parent, then we create a tension, a destructive system that will start to unfold. Correct. You know, over time. So whether it's an infant and you think that they can't understand you, or a toddler, or an early elementary school, or a middle schooler or high schooler, how you interact with each other as partners, as parents. And so the hardest lesson for me to learn how to do was to do this concept of co-parenting with someone that I could no longer dialogue with.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we have split families, when we have new step parents, when we have those other regions to explore, it still comes down to how am I going to be a real mature grown-up and model, problem solving, model communication, model respect, and model stretching way out of our comfort zone, and still having those boundaries, which is, no, you don't get to talk to me like that, but we still need to problem solve.
Exactly.
And so how do we show our children that we know how to do that? Because if we can't show our children and then we're mad at them that they can't.
Exactly. Exactly. I know it's
Right.
it's mind blowing. And then to even add an extra layer on there is that, through my own personal work, I've begun to realize how much of how when children are born in utero, and this goes back to a lot of even studies within children who have been adopted, and in those early years of attachment that are going on to create a really solid attachment, we have the psychic skills of children coming into this world being on heightened, where we don't have as much as the programs and systems having been put in place. So you have a lot of kids, and some of the time, I think when we see them, by the time they get to us or family systems get to us, is when these kids are extremely empathetic and open to their environment within the energy field, within the family system, and they're picking up on subtle cues. So parents can maybe be thinking, and it was the whole, I don't know how many years ago this was, where, well, we don't fight in front of one another. There's no tension. We treat each other well. We sit down at the dinner table every night. On the outside, it looks like picture perfect. But we have these exceptional children that have come into our life that are picking up on these small nuances. It's the same with, they say, I'm a huge dog person, and when you're part of a family and you're a pack animal, the dogs can sense before you come home.
Right.
And our children can sense right when we walk in the room what our energy is, and that could be them reading our nonverbal or our verbal linguistic emissions out into the environment. That can be us huffing and puffing, and it can be any number of things, or it can just be that they knew something big was going on, and maybe before you left the house they saw the tension rising, or you would maybe said something to them that indicated that it was going to be a rough day at work, and so they're trying to pick up because they've heard little pieces or have experienced that with you. So we have a whole nother layer of that psychic connection that children have to their parents, that where repeated traumas and different things can be happening that are shaking them, creating more of an energetic connection between the parent and child. And also what we have found, I know you and I, in our work with family systems, is oftentimes one person needs to let that energy out. And I always tell my families that somebody goes, well, 1 minute, Johnny is acting out, but then Susie is completely put together and not acting out. And then Susie, once he's finished, does it. And I said, well, only one of them is going to act out at a time. But basically what they're doing is they're letting off some steam from that volcano so the whole eruption can occur. And that's just how the system works. But right now, these systems are really shaken up, being put on their side, and all of these things. So, I think it does come back to a lot of what we've discussed before, which is that staying present, that ability to regulate our emotions, and not just regulating them on the outside, but also regulating them on the inside. And
I was going to say, it's almost the inside's more important.
Exactly.
Because, if we think that, okay, I want to go to a couple of things that you said and go right straight to the inside outside.
Perfect.
What I've been seeing is an increased level of sensitivity and awareness in our kids. You know, their ability, they're coming in much more observant. Their senses are online on a degree that we haven't seen before. They're noticing nuances. They're picking up on things. And this is part of a progressive skill set that we're seeing, you know, decade by decade by decade coming in is a kid that's online, meaning that all of their systems are awake and online at birth. And we're kind of still trying to get ours online. We're still learning, like, hey, I want to be cool. I want to get there. I want to try to learn this stuff. And they're looking at you going, oh, you don't even have a clue.
Exactly.
And so they're loving and they're patient with us. But the bottom line is our ability to know ourselves is lagging so much behind the children that we are birthing at this time. And so anyone who knows themselves, who has taken the outer and the inner, and they've brought it together, and so that we're in that authentic present self, you'll notice that these kids, however age they are, they kind of look over and they go, well, hello, it's nice to meet you. I can talk to you. You're in your body.
Yeah.
And so when we have parents that are distracted, they're in their head, and they're smiling and they're going through the motions, and they even have a voice that they use that says, I'm here, I'm pretending like I'm paying attention to you, or I'm pretending like I care about your homework, or I'm pretending like I'm nice to your dad or your mom. The kids are looking at us and going, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Because what I see on the inside and what you're presenting on the outside are not in coherence. And so when they're not coherent, is that a skill you want me to learn? And then when we teach them that there's a level between our internal and our external, and they play it back to us, we get really angry and frustrated with them. But we don't understand that that's what we're doing. So we have to bring these together.
Correct.
and say, you know, I'm having a hard time breathing right now. I'm triggered by something and I want to listen to you, but I notice my head keeps going to this thing. So give me about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, give me a half an hour. Let me go take a walk. Let me go do some yoga poses. Let me go upstairs, change my clothes, take a shower, whatever I need to do when I'm in that place, and let me come back down. And will you let me know if you see me here?
Absolutely.
Because I think I'm here, but you know, and I know that I might still have some layering to go. And so what we're doing is we're empowering our children to know us and to have a voice about what they actually see, rather than disempowering them by asking them to pretend that what they see they don't see, and that it's not acceptable for them to call us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen that again and again, you know, different philosophies and families who, you know, who try to protect and not share what's going on, and particularly, I don't know if these are societal pressures or just generational pressures of not sharing openly about your process in developing and processing emotions. You know, it's been such you know, it's kind of been a dirty word in some ways, or it's just because it feels uncomfortable. I think it's very difficult for people to even talk about their feelings. And so unless, and families will often come to me and be like, well, he doesn't share. He never tells me what is going on with him. And then we go back to, well, have you shared openly with him or her about what's going on? Oh no, I'm kind of a stuffer too. And so, you know, I think you come with a really good point, which is what can we tell them, and really model those conflict resolution points in time for them on how to deal with it, because these are skills that they're going to use with a friend, you know, where they're going to be able to maybe have a blow up of disagreement. And this goes even between partners, you know, parents having a disagreement, whether it be online in a social media environment, or at the dinner table, or in the morning while getting ready for school, and them to be able to see their parent come back up to the other parent and say, hey, I was in the wrong, and creating some way of interacting, or my head got a little bit a hold of me, and I was moving forward through time, and I didn't have control over my emotions. And so, sometimes I think we're so busy putting out this image of who we are from the outside that we're not, like you said, teaching that coherence and how to become into the center. And then as I was speaking, it kind of reminded me of something, and I believe I spoke about before. It's this, then we add on a whole nother layer, and this is what I've talked about with my young adults that I've worked with in our past classes, is not only are our children, especially depending on what age we give them access to social media, and that being any number of social media, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, all of the ones, Twitter, they have access to. And even if they don't have their own accounts, they can still go on once they have the internet and read those things going on. And what they see are another separation. So we kind of have those three separations. We have the separation from what we're saying on the outside, what's going on truly internally. And then we have these avatars that are out there in the world that have a completely different persona. And it's like we have at least 3 split personalities going on.
At least, maybe more. At least.
Absolutely. And how confusing is that? And I like to share little things. My son, who is 14, he's about to start high school tomorrow during the pandemic. So, that's always a fun place to be. And he shared recently about some things that he saw about friends who, the end of 8th grade, obviously they were on quarantine, so there really wasn't a lot of interaction. These are acquaintances, people that he had seen at school, that he sees now on Snapchat, who have decided to go, people that he didn't really think as being those types, who are now publicly putting out there on Snapchat that they've decided to try marijuana, and are really putting that out there on their statuses for everybody to see. And just how that is affecting who he is and the sort of thoughts that he's having, because he's not able to reconcile the people that he had seen for real, right? And then maybe even kids that he's seen on his Zoom in the last little bit, and who he's actually going to see tomorrow at school.
Yeah, well, there's many layers going on, and I anticipate that as the pressure goes up, it's going to be natural to want to protect by putting as many avatar layers out there as possible and sort of keeping them separate. What I think is the most important thing is when we get to our core relationships, our relationship with self, our relationship with our partner, our relationship with our children, is that we try to be as authentic as possible and as real as possible, because I think that that's really that's the honey. That's the thing that keeps them coming back, because anyone can go and play and pretend. Yeah. And the more we pretend, the more that becomes a world they want to play in. And I know it sounds naive, but I've raised 3 kids now, and they're raised and they're gone. And and I've worked with family systems for the last 10 years that are in different stages of children leaving, between 14, then 18, then 19, and it's those authentic relationships with that. They're the ones who call and go, "Can I talk to you about something, Mom?" That's where we want them. We want them to go out and have confidence in their ability to see the world and trust what they see and know and navigate their own lives. But we also want them to know that they have core people that know them and see them, that they can use as sounding boards when they're ready. So we have to also make it okay for them, for our children or for our partners, to be able to come and talk to us and say, "I don't know what to do. I'm struggling with this," or "I saw this and I felt this, then I felt that, and I wasn't sure what foot to step forward." And so when we enlist, especially our children who are 8 to 10 and over, and saying, "What would you do?" Yeah. Because we're teaching them at all times that their opinion matters, that their problem solving is observant and it's spot on, and then we build them up with empowerment techniques, which is, I noticed that you said this and this. And that tells me you're really paying attention, and wow, what a cool skill to have. And so we don't make it, I'm so proud of you for being smart or observant. We just talk to you're wise, or you're observant, or you put some things together, and it's beautiful to see you do that.
Absolutely.
And so we keep building their confidence, where we become very real and authentic for them to come bounce things off of. Somebody has to be that. Then they have friends. Of course, we want them to have friends that they can do that, because they don't want to talk to their parents about everything. No. We want them to have conversations between themselves as siblings, that there is a world that they observe of from the child world into the adult world that's real, and they have to be able to validate that. So we want them to have sibling relationships. We want them to have friendship relationships, and we want them to understand that they can also have peer relationships with other teachers or adults in their world, coaches, tutors, instructors, and that they can talk to them the same way that they can talk to us, which is, I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to do with it. This is what's working. This is what's not working. To show me what I'm missing.
Absolutely.
And then we have the ability, and to me, that's what I mean when I'm theoretically saying, get on the balls of your feet, be flexible, be adaptable, and look and talk about what you're seeing and what are we going to do today? Because if we can't problem solve, and the world's changing all the time, then we're kind of stuck.
It's true. It's very true. And what a perfect time, you see all these memes and pictures, and then we started out focusing on this huge descent and chaos and sort of two worlds coming together, and the volcano, these visuals that we were having, and I always like to have that bird's eye view and look down on it, and it's like, dang, COVID, with all of its subsequent effects on medical, the family, education, postal system, travel, all of these things. Perhaps this is a blessing that just really does keep on giving, because really right now is such a perfect time. And I've seen this within my own relationships, and I've seen it being played out with others, to begin to model that problem solving, that flexibility, that surfing stance to those around us, and how infectious that is, and really how that affects the children in our lives when we're able to say, computers out. Okay, normally I'd get pretty stressed out about it, but this is what I'm going to do. And what do you think? And you're showing them right here, right now, in this moment, that pretty much anything can come at us, a hurricane, fires, earthquake, and I've got you. I'm able to hold you and me in this, bubble of protection, because my emotion regulation, my ability to control my energy body is such that I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm willing to dance with you, to work with you as we figure this out together as equals, as individuals in respects of each other's beings. And that to me is a gift that we're all given right now.
Totally. And we've talked about how important it is to be a sovereign human being. And then we want to also honor the fact that each of our children, whether they're a year and a half, to whether they're 19 years old, they are sovereign human beings. They have their own purpose. They have their own world. Our job is to make sure that they're confident in that. Mm-hmm. So part of my strategy at all times as a parent was to teach some levels of responsibility, which is, we're going to cook, and we're going to have fun eating meals, and we're going to clean up, and we're going to have some things that we have to do around the house together. Everyone carries their own weight. So I always distributed out the work to make sure that they knew how to run a house. And now, I have their roommates or their partners are like, oh my gosh, your daughter, your son, they're amazing in what they know how to do. And it's like, well, we just all did it together. So I wanted them to be responsible. The second thing was that I wanted my kids to have a lot of downtime where they got super good and bored, where they had to figure out, what am I supposed to do besides rely on mom or dad or friends or television? And so I had to model, you know, when there's extra time, I got my book out. When there was extra things that I wanted to do, I wrote, I did my own yoga practice, I took my own hikes, and I would say to them, this is what I'm going to do for me. And I wouldn't say, why don't you go do da 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 da.
Okay.
I would say, I'll be back, or I'm going to be sitting over here, or good luck, you got a couple hours. So if the power goes out, or if we're in a snowstorm, or, you know, it's a good long summer weekend and all the friends are out of town, you know, what we started to do is we started to find that if we give our children time, they'll figure something out, and not from a naive, wouldn't it be nice, you know, Joan Cleaver crap, but give them time and show them what you do with your time.
Absolutely.
And model it. I'm very focused. I've got the things that work for me, or I've got some extra time. Would you like to do something with me? And so we're, instead of being so focused on them that we forget our own sovereignty, we forget our own life. Most of the time our kids are like, just get in your own circle and stay over there and let me figure this out. And we don't know how to do that as parents. We know how to hover. We know how to help. We know how to prove meaning by being a parent, but we don't know how to show them how to be an adult, an independent, you know, happy with ourself adult, and how to create an adult life that works.
Absolutely.
And we start at 2 years old. I'm tired, I'm going to go take a nap. You should probably take a nap too. If you don't, at least you're in your room and it's quiet while I take my nap. You know, like we model things for them at all times.
Correct.
This is a quiet house between 1 and 3.
Exactly.
You know, or, you know, every evening, I am going to make, like, it never failed at 8:30 or 9. You know, the house would start to quiet down. I've got kids blowing all over the place, and I'd put the tea kettle on, and I'd start to make my sleepy time tea. And one at a time, they'd come down, making tea. Yeah. You want some? Yeah. Or they'd start, you know, and then there's this whole culture where we sip tea at night, and sometimes we sit together, sometimes they take it to their room, but it's kind of like, you know, you can count on the fact when mom's in the house that there's going to be tea at night.
Yeah.
And so these are the things that we try to instill, which is, I know who I am. If I don't know who I am, I don't know what to instill in you, because how can I teach you who you are if I don't know who I am?
Correct. Yeah, and as I listen to you talk, that of course, and I think, and I put myself in other people's shoes too, who are maybe less in their process of who they are and who haven't necessarily decided who they are, separate sovereign beings away from their children, who that person is. That is them as a woman, them as a father.
And you're deep in it, you don't know.
No.
You're 35, you're 40, you're 45, you got 2, 3 kids, you got schedules, you got online homework, you've got a job, you've got this, you've got that. It's kind of like, great pie in the sky conversation, Denise and Erin. However, get to the real world, and it's sort of like, but wait a minute, you're the one who sets the pace. So set the pace that works for you and have them orbit around it. Stop chasing all of these other beings, and set an anchor, and then let it move from there.
Absolutely.
And the good news is that, you know, some of us have both parents home right now. Some of us have the ability to have extended family come in and interact and help out. So, you know, these pods that we set, maybe it's time to set them a little bit bigger so that there's a lot more support. We don't know. We're making this shit up. We're making this stuff up. I'm going to be potty mouth. I'm always potty mouth when I'm going on this stuff.
I think we're allowed to be potty mouth right now with all of everything that's going on, because that's real. That's real. I mean, our kids are going to be hearing it anyway, so why not speak to one another from a real place? Absolutely. Yeah. You know, and for me, you know, because like you said, I'm kind of more in the middle of it, just because I do have a child at home, and then I see people with multiple children at home. I would say maybe the most valuable thing that I have done is turn off the TV. really turn it off. And it's
Oh,
amazing what has happened. And I have people who say, but it keeps me company, just having that in the background. Just the sheer amount of noise, if we just look at it from a level of the electronics within our lives creating the noise, and then the amount of people in the world compared to when we were little, and the amount of machines, and then the amount of cars, and just those decibels on our system, we know is having a complete shakeup. Plus, like your children, when they had to just be bored, when those snowstorms came in, those really boring days of summer where they had to go and get super creative. And we can create those moments for ourselves with discipline and a sense of responsibility, where we are alone with our own thoughts. I kind of had to go into it very unwillingly when during those times when, and I think parents who have separated and go when the child goes back and forth between households are thrown into that at an even younger or an earlier age than the ones that their children are constantly there all the time. But okay, I don't have my child for, or 2, 3, 4-year-old for 3 days on end. What am I going to be doing with myself during this time? And
right.
so, that is when you really have to look at that person standing and looking back at you in the mirror. And
Do you fill it with other people? Do you fill it with busyness, or do you relinquish, that and look at the person in the mirror and say, what do we need to do today to get to know each other? Because again, we're going to keep driving this home over and over and over again in this episode, Erin, is that if we don't know who we are, we can't model, we can't lead, we can't direct.
Correct.
Because what we're doing is we're in reaction and spin all the time. If we know who we are, then and we say something, our children will listen to us. If we're in a spin and we're on the phone and we're busy and we're not following through with what we said and we're not setting boundaries, and then we throw something out, our kids are like, yeah, give her 5 minutes, she'll forget, or she'll just raise her voice, and until she gets to this decimal, why even bother? She's not paying attention to us. And then we have this situation where we have highly reactive family systems that only know how to talk at certain decimals or certain levels of intensity, because everything else becomes so normalized. We want to take all of those down a notch or 2 or 3 and find out why is it so chaotic, and how do we adjust that and make it a little bit more workable for each of us. Now, each of us as parents is going to have a different level of that. Just like, I noticed with a really good girlfriend of mine, her level of movement is different than my level of movement. In my partnerships, my partner and I are in different levels. The things that we like to do, we do really well together. Then we also have time where we do things very differently. We also want to show that to our children so that they don't expect people to drop everything and be present for them the way we do, whether it's a teacher or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a friend, that, hey, you're not giving me the attention and the chaos that I'm used to, so this doesn't feel right to me. So we're looking at what are we mentoring, and what are we showing them at all times and passing on. Absolutely.
And I do think it goes back to a lot of those components of cognitive behavioral therapy that where is our locus of control to? And I know this also nicely fits in with yoga and any form of spirituality or mindfulness that somebody engages in. And that locus of control and the ability to change one's feelings, change one's behaviors and subsequent consequences to the behaviors, all pivot on changing our thought processes. And so one of the things that I often give parents and adults, and children that I work with, is doing that sort of diary of sorts, of taking note about what your thoughts are telling you on a day in and day out. And it can be really surprising, especially some of us that are more anxious or depressed, or some of us that have more difficulty controlling our anger, or, you know, any number of things that on the outside we know, hey, this is something we really want to control, is to begin doing that in a very loving way for ourselves, because this isn't a place where we want to go, oh my gosh, what am I telling myself in my head? Because that's where that inconsistency that our kids that are so in tune with our world and in tune with us energetically are picking up on. Because if every day I'm thinking to myself, whether I'm verbalizing it or not, which sometimes we don't even realize we're verbalizing it, which is, gosh, you're stupid, or you could have done that better, or you should have done that. You don't look good today, or your hair this, or you're this or that. And if we start kind of tallying it up, and it doesn't even need to be something where you write it down. I think it is fabulous to write it down, just so you can begin to dissect it and change it into something more related and grounded in reality. Because a lot of these all or nothing phrases that we've been sort of beating ourselves up through life with are not based in reality. They're based in programs, maybe something that we've heard from when we were younger, or just something that has creeped in throughout the years. If you don't have time to write it down, even just at the end of the day, as you're going through your day, think about, okay, about 60% of what I said to myself today was tinged with negativity, or was tinged with violence, or was tinged with the should, could, would, these limiting statements on who I am in my magnificence as a spiritual, grounded, beautiful human being. And then see if you can start bringing that down to where, okay, now only about 10% of the time am I saying the world is horrible, it's falling apart, we're all going to die. And this can also be externalizing or putting the blame on others for what's going on in this chaotic world too. It's not even necessarily the way we're talking about ourselves. It's also blaming the others in our environment, or others that we don't have control over, as to what's going on with us, and taking that in and using those words of hate and distrust and confusion and just uproar, and really bringing it back to ourselves. Have you
You know, it's an interesting discussion on cognitive behavioral therapy and concepts of the mind, because when I started working with quantum physics and started to look at how energy works, because it cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transformed from one form to another. So things happen, we just have to shift the way we handle them, right? The piece that keeps coming up to me is that form follows thought, which is whatever we're thinking, it starts to show up in front of us, and all of a sudden what we're thinking is being played out in front of us. So we're creating something in front of us. And so I like the idea of being conscious of it and noticing, what is your self-talk? How much time are you really up there, beating yourself up, or being judgmental, or pointing the finger, or spinning, and then watching the world around you. And then what if we could calm this down a bit and watch what happens on the outside?
Yes.
So, thinking aware, using your head to manage your thinking isn't it's like putting a really bad manager in charge of a bad classroom. You're like, so who's really going to lead here? So we have to be able to bring in another form, which is, where did the thinking start spinning? And that's where the anxiety, or where did the thinking go really flat, which is the depression? Where did the thinking get really scattered and erratic, which is the lack of focus? How do we bring the thinking in with another technique? And whether that's breathing, or whether that's walking, physical exercise. Again, it doesn't have to be anything really big. It could be taking a bath and allowing it to be silent. So you could go towards your elements. You can go to earth, get outside, move your body, do something physical. You could go to water, which is go sit next to the water, go take a bath, go drink some water, go play with the fact that maybe my emotions are all attached to all of this and I need to calm them down. Or your fire, which is I'm pissed off and I'm putting little sparks in all of my thoughts and it's just making a big flame up here. How do I bring this thought process down? And so, knowing whether I'm at 80%, 50%, 10%, that's awesome. And then what do we need to do to bring it down? What techniques work to calm it down? Because when our brain calms down, the world outside us calms down. And then things aren't as big. They're not as hard. They're not as chaotic as they seem.
Correct.
So we have to be able to quiet that brain a bit. And I think that's kind of a fun idea. It's like you got a bad classroom and you got a bad manager and nobody has any idea how to do anything other than keep throwing things around. We want to be able to bring some peace into that chaos.
Yeah. And I would even go one step further too, is to find out what those thoughts are going on within your children's heads too, or within your spouse's heads. And I think that you have done amazing work in terms of talking about how to bring it down. I still believe that there's a lot of us, myself included, depending on the day, that are still not even slowing down enough or cognizant enough to know that our thoughts are dictating our feelings.
Yeah. I wish there was a magic, like a magic moment or a magic clue that we have where it's kind of like, take a pulse. Wait a minute. What were you thinking about? Where do you see that outside? Because all we need is one or two feedback mechanisms before we go, oh no, this is, the outer world is mimicking my thought process.
Absolutely.
And so, I don't know that there's anything that can teach us better than a temper tantruming 2 or 3 year old or 4-year-old, or a snarky teen between 13, 14, or a, really sort of aggressively bossy partner. And then to just go calm and watch what happens and start to play with it, which is become your own experiment, which is, what if I did my marine breathing, which is like, I'm going to breathe in for 4 and I'm going to bring out for 4, and I'm not going to react. I'm just going to keep breathing, and I'm going to bring my body out of fight or flight. I'm going to bring my body out of chaos. I'm going to let my brain slow down and then watch and just go, does anything change out here? And it's not one of those things where you breathe twice and you go, nope, no change, keep going. You have to, we have to do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We might even get silent and just keep doing what you're doing, but bring your breathing down, and then imagine it bringing the whole house down.
Yes.
And we're that powerful, but we don't know it as parents. And that's the piece that I wish I had, I could wiggle my nose and go back in time and go, Denise, if you had just did deeper breathing at these periods of time when it was so stressful, we know it would have changed everything.
Yeah.
But we learn that. We learn that after they've been grown. We learn that to teach. And then we also practice it. That was the beauty, was going from a high chaotic situation into a calming situation and learning that that's what I know how to do, is bring calm and joy into things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that truly is my job. And our kids they're so encouraging when they see that. They can feel it too. And as soon as you start using these words and even saying out loud, and that is okay to say that, okay, I'm going to try something new. Like you said, the kid is tantruming. You have the kid that's snarky, the teenager, you have anxiety going to a new school, or any number of things that's in your outside environment that clearly you're feeling yourself getting worked up with. And you try that, you bring it down. And I always said this when I was working with children who were going into a tantrum when I was working in residential treatment, is if we were able to come down an octave or two below that in terms of our volume, but also our cadence in our body movements, we would be able to bring down the situation. So, you know, for kids that are a little bit older, or your husband or your partner, where you say, this is what I'm doing, and you try it and see how they react. And then maybe even bring it back to them. Hey, did you notice Mom, Dad did something a little different today? This is what I did. When I did do that, how did that make you feel? Did it make you want to come and talk to me more? Did it, you know, what was it going at? So open them up. And it's real fascinating, because once you do start modeling this, and I've seen it with my son recently, you know, he'll come out, what are you doing out here? Well, I'm doing a sun meditation. Well, why? Well, this is why I'm doing it. Well, I want to try it. And sure, are they going to always be able to be 100% receptive to something that you are new trying? Not always, but little by little, you're going to see it come up into your conversations. Well, I've noticed that this happens, and then I act this way. And you see that they're making those connections on their own. And it's just quite beautiful to witness.
It is. And what we want to do, though, is we want to be really conscious of, are we modeling or are we trying to impress upon? Because there's a really big difference, which is, I just did something. Did you notice that I just did that? Now I want you to do that. As opposed to, I just did something and I don't really care whether you noticed it or not until I know that I've got a handle on it, and I've got a handle on it, and I've got a handle on it, and it starts to impact our relationship with this one teen or with this one child who's temper tantruming. Let's go to, you know, we know that there might be tired, hungry, you know, energy going on with a toddler who's sort of exacerbated throughout the activities of the morning, and you have a meltdown. What if you just sat down on the floor and you just became really open in your posture and you started to do your deep breathing? And no matter what they did, you just kept doing that deep breathing. We don't go into, now this is what I did and this is why I did it. We just do that. And then sometimes you might even bring your hand out like, come sit with me. And they'll come sit with you. And then next thing you know, you're doing some breathing. And then the part where we model it is we empower our child by, when we watch them like rise up and then catch themselves and breathe themselves down, just go, I saw that. That was pretty cool. And so then you get to see them doing something rather than impressing what you want them to learn on top of them. Again, they're sovereign beings. They have to take on what they need to take on, which is going to be the hardest part, I think, for all of us in parenting, which is we don't get to impress upon, force, discipline, or subjugate our children with our expectations, our needs, and our patterns in our lifestyle. We have to manage our own, set parameters as a parent. Like, you know, in this house, we don't say the word F, you know, or we don't hit each other, or we all go to bed. The house is quiet at 10. I don't care what time you go to sleep, but the house is quiet at 10. So that there's some parameters that they can work with, but within that, they have the autonomy of free choice. We have to be able to give our children that.
Correct. Yes. And sometimes it worries me a lot when I work with families who, you know, have children who are 16, 17, 18, and they're still very much regulating how much time they're getting online, how much time that they're getting alone, any number of things, or they've never left their child for a long period of time to be able to test what's going on. And then they have the expectation that they're going to be able to send this child off to college.
Right.
Or to live on their own. And it's like, okay, well, I think it's probably best that we do a trial run a couple times. Make sure you don't burn the house down and any other number of things. And, you know, and as we're talking here, it just kind of goes back to making me realize just how much more opportunities I want to provide people to learn some of these skills and to have some of these moments of joy and epiphanies, and how I want to cultivate our programs with more of the yoga, the guided meditation, the connections that can be had between like-minded people within a community of sharing and learning from one another. So, I look forward to continue, bringing these types of environments together where we can discuss and talk about our philosophies and the different ways of teaching. But I also look forward to beginning to take a lot of these classes that we're going to be offering, just so I can begin to experience myself what that truly feels like, when we do this with our bodies, and begin modeling that and to my children and to others, and just kind of integrating that into who I am as a person. So I'm excited.
Yeah, we teach what we need to learn, and we also have this great opportunity to teach what we have learned. So we're learning and we are educated at the same time. Correct. And so there's a wisdom in, life is always about learning. At no point do we have all the answers and we get to turn around and tell someone, I know what you need to do. What we can say is, I know what I think I would do at this point. And that may change. I may renegotiate and do something completely different. But that's my awareness of who I am right now, period. And that's where we're at right now, is that, we're almost, the analogy as we bring this to a close is that with COVID, with school starts, with the election coming up, with so many profound changes, it's almost as if we're trying to walk across a river on some rocks, and we're like, now I could jump onto that one, but I might slip and get wet, or I could step on this little one and get my shoes wet, but get onto that one. And so we're just sort of picking and choosing our pathway across a river, and every single person is going to do it differently. You may decide you don't want to get your tennis shoes wet and you have to stay on top, and then your kid might just go knee deep and plow across. I mean, like, everyone's going to have their own path. Because they see it differently, and we have to go, well, that's an interesting way. I hadn't thought about that, because that's where we're at right now. And with parenting, we have to be open and creative.
Absolutely.
Keep doing this every week and sharing. What are we seeing? What are we doing?
Absolutely. And that's rising to the top of the P in the parenting paradigm of that parity of the perspective, and looking at it from that bird's eye view. And it's a beautiful view to do, because I think a lot of us will get stuck in the weeds, looking at the tree in front of us, looking at the next moment. And this is just something that we've done just out of habit over and over and over again. And we don't give ourselves permission to take that step back and to begin to look at it. And with parenting especially, I think it is so important, because there's so much to learn from our children. There really is.
Well, and who's asking their children? Exactly. Who's saying, do you want to go back to school? Do you want to do online, or do you want to do homeschooling? And I'm willing to create that for you.
I'm willing to do whatever needs to happen to make that a possibility for you. And I've seen a lot of people stepping up and changing it. And of course I get the perspective from the parents usually about what they're doing to create these different environments for their kids, but don't always know if that's what the child wants.
Right. And again, it's a group effort. You're in this all together. You've got to be able to start dropping some roles and changing things up and letting different people lead. Kind of like, we could think of every single kind of television show, whether it's the cartoon The Incredibles, whether it's, crossing the frontier in a wagon. Where do these bizarre skills start to show up? Where you're like, oh, you know how to do that. Well, I know how to do this. What do you know how to do? Because we're in this together. So huddle up and have some fun with this. And then we'll come back next week and we'll play.
Perfect. I look forward to it. Have a good rest of your evening, everybody, and I hope you found this helpful. We'll see you next week. Bye now.
Awesome.